So I've spent a lot of time in that. I'm a big believer in that. And this talk not only applies to that, but it would apply to any situation where you might be going in for a disaster response, or again, into an area that's medically insecure and you're going to try to create care. So that's what I want to focus on here. And I just want to show a couple pictures before we get started related to how these trips might take place when you go into these medically insecure places or areas. So the transportation issues sometimes are a very interesting way to get somewhere. It's very common to go into these like 4, 6-seat airplanes or go in by helicopter. Usually the landing areas would be somewhere like you might see with a cow field where all the cows are moving aside as you're coming in and landing, which is what we see with that airplane there. Or you might be having a military helicopter. This one's in India, the second one. The first one's in Vanuatu. You might have a military helicopter that's bringing you in and dropping you off and saying, we're not going to come back and get you because the landing zone's too small. So that might be it. Or you might go somewhere where they have like 3 trucks and that's all they have for transportation, and people on the island hitch rides in the back of the truck, and that's how you get from one place to another unless you're hiking. And then again, you might be going to places, you heard me talk about this yesterday, where you're providing care and you might be used to having great new technology, and yet what they are giving you as far as transportation may be something that has to be push-started. This is in Iraq, and I talked about that yesterday. We're actually push-starting that ambulance with patients in the back to try to transport them to higher echelon. I spent many times, this was after an earthquake, but yet a lot of our mission was medical insecurity because we were up in the mountains in Nepal, and we were dropped off, and we were going from one village to the next village with our medical gear in our backpack. So when we got dropped off, we set up a staging area. We left all our stuff there that came in the big bins. We would fill up in the morning. We would go out for maybe 2 days and then come back, resupply, and go out to other villages because we were looking for people that had significant injuries that we might be able to facilitate referrals to further on care, or that we might be able to help with whatever their chronic issues were. So sometimes I'm walking, sometimes you have to walk, and then, believe it or not, sometimes you hitch a ride with whatever the local population might provide you, such as what we see here. That's in the Dominican Republic, I believe. The people that you go in to see, this is in India. It's very interesting that what we think of as poverty here in the United States and what you can see on an international scale and how that impacts their medical insecurity problems. Here I'm in India, and we're way out in the middle of nowhere, and this population here was considered the lowest level of the caste system, or the Dalits. They had no option of medical care, no option of government assistance. They were basically on their own to take care of themselves. This is a row of houses. You can see the kids in the middle, and the houses are about 100 square foot each, and they're just made out of scrap stuff that they had and found, and they might have a full family of 6 or 8 in the 100 square foot home. They would get their water from, a pond that was also used to bathe in. The waste was disposed there, and so on. So, you'll see these housing situations. This is up in the mountains in Nepal. This is where these people lived. This is not an emergency shelter. This is actually where they lived every day of their life. Small families. Each one of those represents a house. And that's where they live. They come out during the day, do their thing, and go in at night. And then when we're there, we're not going to be much different than these. It went underneath, but we're not going to be much different than these. We bring tents. My gear is extremely expensive because I'm old. I don't like weight anymore, and the lighter it gets, the more it costs. So my tent here only weighs under 2 pounds, and it's a good 3-season tent, even up in the high mountains of Nepal. And most of us have tents. You can see we've set up, and we're moving from village to village to try to take care of people. We set up our clinics in these areas, and not like a pretty little clinic that you're going to go into, or a church or something. Sometimes it's a building like we see here that's been abandoned, rats inside, whatever it might be. We set up benches, people line up, and we try to process them through. When they find out you're there, especially in the medically insecure areas, they're all coming. They're all coming. Sometimes we just set up our clinics out in the open. Here we can see a spot where they have a shade shelter they've made, and we have chickens and all kinds of animals that run through. The village comes, and we try to process them through. Here, each provider is probably about 5 feet apart, and we're seeing people, and somebody's helping the funneling process. as we work them through. And then sometimes as we're traveling from place to place, we'll set up or take care of somebody and come back through every 2 days or so. This woman was caught in an earthquake. She had a calcaneus fracture that was open. It was very bad. We tried to aerovac her out. We actually got a small helicopter to come in for her, and we thought she would go, but when they came to take her, she got a twig in her hand and started beating the living dickens out of them and said, "I'm not going." And she refused transport. So we came back through her every day, every 1 to 2 days, and continued to treat this fracture, to try to close things up, treated her with some antibiotics we have. Whether she survived after we left or not, I don't know, because she was in her 80s, and she smoked cigarettes. How she got them, I have no idea, because the nearest road was over 40 miles away. But somehow somebody's bringing her cigarettes. I could never quite figure that out. But nevertheless, this is what it is sometimes. The ideal situation would have been to aerovac her out, get her higher echelon care. A calcaneus fracture has a poor outcome, even in the United States, where we can get you into care right away. They just don't heal that well. And this was an open fracture in a very not clean environment. Every day we would come, take the bandage off, and it was just filthy every time because she was dragging herself across the dirt, and doing life. And she had to do life. So that's some of the things as far as the types of shelters that they had, what we had, and the types of clinics we set up. But then there were also things that we would see that you might not see here in the U.S. because we usually wouldn't let them get that extreme. I believe this is tophaceous gout, is what I believe it is. I didn't put a knife in it to see what would come out, but I believe that's what it was. I'd never seen a case this bad in the U.S. Here, this guy has COPD. It's obvious he has COPD from this picture, to me at least, based on his posturing and how he's given the appearance of breathing. But the reason they have this so bad here and in many places is because they cook inside those little homes, and they don't have good ventilation systems. When I say they cook, I mean they build a fire on the ground, because it's a dirt ground, and they cook over that fire, so the home's just engulfed in smoke, and they're breathing it their whole lives, and almost all of them have COPD as they get older. We have a lot of malnutrition everywhere we go, and worms. This child probably had worms. And then we see weird things. In the island of Vanuatu, it's one of the only places in the world that has something called yaws, which is like a syphilis type thing on the skin. Very, very bad, very bad. This poor kid had it everywhere. Every kid we saw had it. Every adult I saw, we had it. And I didn't know what it was. Nobody in the team knew what it was until I finally talked to a medic with a translator, because they had one medic on this whole island. And I said, what is this? What do you do for it? And he said, we give him a penicillin shot. We don't have any penicillin, but that's what we do to treat it. And it was yaws, and I did the research on it and found out that it's and I should have done due diligence before I go, which was a lesson learned by me. I should have known that Vanuatu was known to have yaws, one of the only places in the world that has yaws, and I should have been prepared for that, but I wasn't. So lesson learned for me as far as due diligence before you go somewhere. Case of scoliosis. This is like a 15-year-old girl. This is her life. This is her lot in life. Nobody's going to fix it for her. I mean, unless we could get her to the United States through some charitable organization and have somebody do charitable surgery on her, this is what she has. And here, trigium. You know the word I'm trying to say here, right? Trigium. So a lot of these guys, they're in sunlight exposure all the time. They get dry eyes, and they end up with these trigiums that grow on the eye, and it'll eventually come over the cornea and the pupil if you let it keep growing. And they could be easily stopped in its progression or prevented if we just had sunglasses and hats and education. But we see a lot of this everywhere we go, especially in the warm climates.